the Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get our complimentary newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Survival Network.
We go back and we look at the United States' debt situation, and it is grave. Credit ratings being cut. Now Moodys is threatening to cut a rating that should have been cut years ago. To bring some clarity to it, I've got Charlie McGrath of wideawakenews.com, first-time guest on financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Charlie, welcome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on.
And we appreciate your coming on. I've been looking at wideawakenews.com for years now. You're doing great work. And something caught my eye that you had in it today, in that finally Moodys is waking up and saying we might have to cut the United States' AAA rating. They're the only rating company left that has kept the United States' AAA rating. What is with that?
We talked a little bit before the program on the topic, and I think you nailed it when you said, the ownership behind Moodys, the Buffett empire, and its love affair with the current administration probably has something to do with why it has not been down. They have not downgraded the U.S. Debt, although I think they put it on a negative watch some time ago. I think what you have in the other two cases with Fitch and with S&P, they missed the boat hugely. This is an understatement. They missed the boat in 2008 like nobody's business. So either they're incompetent or you're more conspiratorial like I am, and you believe that there's these guys are in bed with the firms that wanted to securitize a bunch of bad mortgages and sell them around the world. But I see now that, especially over the last couple of years, that every time we've had a debt ceiling increase, these folks, Moody's, S&P, Fitch, they get drug into the mainstream business media, and we are all supposed to be terrified because they're considering doing something to our credit rating. And there's no difference in this situation. All the talk, of course, is we're going off the fiscal cliff January 1. And, you have Lagarde coming out yesterday, Christine Lagarde of the IMF coming out yesterday talking about that there's three pillars that are being pulled out of the global economy that could lead to collapse. And, the biggest pillar of all is the fiscal cliff of the United States. Citigroup came out last week with the same jargon. We're going to hit this fiscal cliff. And all of them, talk about the need for, the front of the story is the same in everyone. They talk about the need for getting our debt under control and having a plan to get the debt to continually go down to reduce our debt load. But in the back of the story, they all end the same as well, which is we have to have the political will. And in this case, it's going to be, I believe, through financial terrorist means, the political will to raise the debt ceiling again. So they talk about getting debt under control. They talk about getting spending under control. They talk about fair taxation. But at the end of the day, they all want the same thing, and that is to raise the $16 trillion debt limit to $20 trillion, or whatever the next stop is on the road to oblivion.
Yeah, and that road to oblivion is being more and more illuminated every day we go by. So obviously Wall Street wants that debt ceiling increased because that's their key to higher profits, right?
That's the only profit there is. Free market capitalism, as far as I'm concerned, my personal opinion, is dead. It doesn't exist. We're not growing jobs to grow profits. We're waiting for the Federal Reserve to start up the printing presses again and spark this optimism on Wall Street so we can go to 14,000 on the Dow.
Yeah. So the way the old means how you used to get wealthy in a capitalist country by starting a business or providing services and adding value, that's kind of dead now.
No doubt about it. If I'm wrong, then I would love somebody to show me where we're growing. It seems the only sector that continues to maintain or expand is the military-industrial complex and the security-industrial complex. Everything else, we have this news coming out. You see the commercials on TV of GM and Chevy having the best year ever. Well, you know what? If I showered you with nothing but cash nonstop, and even if you were losing $40,000 per program that you produced, but I'm giving you $100,000 per program, well, you can't lose either. And this is, from my perspective, this is the case of our entire economy. If it isn't awash, in a bunch of cheap money and programs behind it, then it's not being successful in the country. And what I was alluding to there with the $40,000 loss is that's what came out just the other day on how much every Chevy Volt has lost since they started selling these. Is on average they're losing $40,000 for each car that they sell.
That's lunacy. Crazy.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, how much longer can they go on that way? But crony capitalism, and I hate that term because it bestows upon a system that is anything but capitalist the somewhat legitimacy of capitalism, because what we have, it's socialism, it's fascism, it's statism, it's syndicalism, if you want to go back to antiquated terms. It's all these things and so much more, and yet we keep doing the same things over and over again, expecting a different result. And somebody used to call that the definition of insanity, although that old saying is a bit overused and abused, you know?
It is. It is indeed.
True?
I mean, it's like listening to Salente talk about the White Shoe Boys. You've heard it a million times.
Yeah.
So it kind of gets beat up, but it was Einstein, I believe, that said it.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and it's 100% true every time someone says it, even though it is overused. A good friend of mine out there in New York with you, Warren Pollock, you know, he's coined the term legal-based and financial-based capitalism, and I get beat up when I do a commentary video or a radio program, and I talk about, you know, this capitalist system that is if I put legal-based or financial-based in front of it or crony in front of it, you know, it sounds like I'm railing against capitalism, and I end up having to explain myself that, you know, no, I'm not. I truly believe in free market capitalism, but I do not believe in this version of capitalism we have right now, because what you just said, I mean, it isn't capitalism at all. We're calling that in name only. It's like calling us a free nation. That isn't true either, but we keep saying it.
Or one nation under God, unless you're a member of the. I don't even want to get into it, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
So
if you're God's Ben Bernanke, you're 100% right.
Yeah.
One nation under God.
Yep, that's for sure. So where does it end? What do we do about it? That's the question, really, right?
Those are great questions. And before we go any further, I do want to thank Chris Atkins at buyemergencyfoods.com. For those that don't know, haven't heard me on other programs, I am doing spokesman work for that company, buyemergencyfoods.com, and Prepare Wise, who supports your program.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
He set me up. Pardon me?
Absolutely. They're a great company. I just got my first load of their food, and the prices are incredible. They don't use any GMO. There's no preservatives in it. And, you know, everyone should have some of it, because you just don't know in this crazy mixed up world what's going to happen.
You're 100% right. And, you know, what I was going to say is Chris Atkins and me doing this spokesman work for him, it's been absolutely fantastic for me, because I'm coming on with people like you that I've not had on my program as guests before. And every time I do one of these interviews, I end up talking the host, which is you in this case, to getting on my program sometime. And it's great. I mean, it's helping connect alternative media and getting, fresh guests on your program, fresh guests on my program. And it's amazing. What I'm finding is that the alternative media, however you want to describe that, the alternative media is very, very wide-reaching, and more people are turning to it. So I do appreciate the efforts of Prepare Wise, Chris Atkins, and the folks over there, because they do care about what they're selling, and what they're selling is such a necessity. And I'll tie that into your question on how does this all end. And I'm going to give you my opinion on how I think it all ends. And it's a real macro look. We had Draghi come out last week talking about this new plan he has to rescue Europe. It's all going to be okay because the European Central Bank is going to pledge unlimited funds to nations that are struggling with debt crisis. Well, since 2008, the collapse of the global economy, every nation has been spending like drunken sailors in order to paper over a depression, instead of letting capitalism take its course and this debt to be cleared, and countries to go bankrupt, corporations to go bankrupt, and let this debt be cleared out. they've just papered it over and increased it. So we've seen this massive increase of sovereign debt in the United States from 2009 till now, going from around $9 trillion in debt to pushing over $16 trillion at this point. In some nations in Europe, it's been even more dramatic of an increase in their sovereign debt than that. And one crisis after another inside of Europe has led to Draghi's ultimate plan, which is this OMT. He's going to go out and have pledge unlimited funds to the nations of Europe. There's 5 pillars in this plan that he came out with. And the only one we need to look at is the first one, because the first pillar says it all. Nations that want to participate in the central bank, in the savior central bank, going to issue them unlimited amount of funds, must, key word here, must submit to outside review of all financial matters inside of that nation. And of course, the person or the entity that's going to be handling the overview, handling the checking up on their financial matters is the International Monetary Fund. Now, in my opinion, what this does is something that's already occurred here in the United States. We've taken free market capitalism, we've taken representative government, we've thrown it in the dustbin of history, and we've replaced it with this on-command economy and a bunch of bankers that are dictating legislation and truly dictating governance in this country. So as far as I'm concerned, representative government died in September of 2008, the last time Congress said no to a banker. Inside of Europe, it's a bit different story. They have 17 nations that make up the Eurozone that use the currency. They all have 17 governments, 17 parliaments that supposedly have to answer to the people, and they're having a tougher time implementing this godlike control by the central bank. So you have 19 summits, you have all kinds of meetings, you have one crisis after another to stoke the fear and, of course, increase the debt. And at the end of the day, you have a central bank standing up saying, okay, we'll fix it all. We'll issue you more debt to solve your debt problem. But if you do, forget about having a representative government. You can vote on little things like who the dog catcher is and if 2 men can marry each other inside of your country. But when it comes to financial matters, we're going to have the IMF oversee it, and we're going to give it a final yes or no before you can do it. So if you control the nation's finance, then you truly do govern that nation from on high. That's where I think we're at right now. We're already here in the United States. They're going there in Europe. But I believe with the statements of people like Jean-Claude Trichet, the former head of the ECB, when he comes out, talks about global financial governance and the need for global financial governance, we're going to keep pushing down this road to where we have, maybe an IMF that oversees all the finances of the world. Maybe an SDR is our currency. Maybe it's backed partially by gold or wampum or whatever. But the truth is these central bankers want to have control. And at every step, they upwardly integrate a power into fewer and fewer hands. The reason that it's important to be prepared for what's coming is because of another tactic they use, which is they govern by crisis. They can't get these things done without having misery on the streets.
Yeah, and I just have a really good story about that. I was talking with a guy who's on my show. He's actually a listener, and we hooked up together, and we're doing things together. And I remember before 9/11, there was a thing called Know Your Customer for banking. And the deal was that they wanted you, the banks, if you came in there and asked to open up an account, they had to get all sorts of ID. They had to go to your place of business to check you out and run you through a whole bunch of databases, whatever it took. And there was an uproar against this. It was in Investors Business Daily and the Wall Street Journal, and it was defeated. And then 9/11 came. Guess what went into the Patriot Act first thing? Know your customer, purportedly to stop money laundering. But obviously there's a control issue here. This is what they're after. They want to dominate your life. They want to tell you what to do, what not to do, and they want control over everything in your life. And that's why it's so important that people, in my opinion, really look for alternative ways to the financial system. And I'm not saying check out because I don't think that's viable, but have your insurance policies in effect so that you're in a position to not be a slave.
Yeah, I couldn't say that better. Look, we saw the Arab Spring last year, and the powers that be, the mainstream media, the mainstream politicians want you to believe that it was all about purple revolutions. These patriots are yearning for freedom inside of North Africa and the Middle East. But let's be real. What really drove these people to the streets, what really drove them to stand in front of military vehicles that were running them over and picking up AK-47s, had nothing to do with the purple finger and voting. Had everything to do that they were spending 50 to 60% of what they made to buy food.
I was just about to say that. It was the price of food. You had riots in Mexico over the price of tacos.
That's right.
This is the reality that and now we're going to see that even worse, by the way. Not that I was looking to get into this, but look, food prices escalating, going ever higher, corn prices with all the ethanol diversion of the crop. We're going to have starvation because the corn crop is so bad this year. And you might see riots a lot closer to home than the Arab Spring, which is exactly how it started in Tunisia. Was we can't afford to eat because we're making $5 a day. We were spending $2 a day on food. Now we're spending $7, and we're starving to death.
Absolutely. And if we think it can't happen here, then we're not basing our thought process in reality, because right now it doesn't seem that way, because we have this never-ending supply of optimism being issued by the Federal Reserve. But understand all these indicators that they're putting out there before us. They want to get through this election, and they want to get our debt, air quote, under control. And just think back since 9/11, or even think back just to 2008. Every single major piece of legislation that has been passed, and every single surreal change in our life, be it in our Constitution or be it in legislation that's in place to be tyrannical, has happened on the heels of a crisis. And this isn't going to change. This pattern isn't going to change. I believe the Jean-Claude Trichet agenda and the central bankers' agenda of global financial governance can only be achieved if there is that kind of panic in the streets and people starving to the point of being able to stand in front of vehicles and be run over, or pick up a gun and take it from their neighbor. So I think it can't happen here is truly unfortunate, because it certainly can, and I believe it's going to. We see people dying in Greece right now. Over the weekend, 15,000 people came out because the IMF was in town to implement more austerity. It's not stopping in Greece. It's not stopping in Italy or Spain or Ireland or Portugal. It is going global, because that's the way the system has been set up. If Greece goes down, if they write down their debt by 50%, which is a default, even though they didn't call it that, then MF Global goes out of business. What happens when we start seeing more and more of these institutions, or more of these countries stand up and say, you know what, we're not going to sign on to this deal. We don't want the ECB to have all the power in the world. If Spain just stood up and said that, right? They said, they said, screw you bankers. We're going to go the way of Iceland. We're going to default.
I was just about to say that. Iceland's the role model for this, the poster child.
Right. But can you imagine, Kerry, if they did that, the carnage that would ensue? Literally, this isn't months, and this is days after they would make an announcement like that. You would see, you'd see Citi, you'd see all these big financial institutions that are heavily involved in sovereign debt of foreign nations. They'd be panicking. You'd have Jim Cramer freaking out on the TV. You'd have all kinds of people just losing their mind, and you might even see a 1,000-point drop in the stock market, all to install fear into looking for a savior, which would be a central banker. And it isn't a savior. It's more of the opposite of that.
It's a Faustian bargain with the devil.
That's exactly right.
Central banker slimes, and it just goes on and on here, and I don't know. There's mass denial going on, because look, Charlie, you walk down the street, what percentage of the American public really understands what we're up against and what's coming down the path?
Most don't, but I will say, because of programs like yours and alternative media, there are more and more who are getting prepared. Chris will tell you, Prepare Wise will tell you that they're keeping up with orders, but it's only because they're doing double and triple shifts. There is more people waking up. They can just feel it. Even if they're not tapped into alternative media, they can just feel things are not right. I mean, the way our economy works isn't right. These unemployment numbers that come out showing a slight decrease in the number of unemployed, it isn't right because we're writing off 368,000 folks out of the participation pool. So I think more and more people are, but you nailed it when you said how many, if you did the survey, you'd probably be stunned, especially if you knocked on your door to your left and to your right in your neighborhood. They're probably tuned into the NFL or the political freak show going on. And if you went,
or American Idol.
Yeah, exactly. If you went to their pantry, they probably have 3 or 4 days worth of food. So, we've seen crisis, man-made disaster and natural. It certainly seems to be on the rise, especially in the man-made portion of things.
Sure.
And it is so unbelievably inexpensive to prepare yourself to be safe inside your own domicile. If it does go crazy, if we do go to war with Iran and suddenly diesel's at $12 a gallon, your store shelves are empty. You don't have to be the guy who's out there trying to figure out how to put food on your table. Especially when you can go to a site like preparewise.com and for $1.44 a serving, you can give yourself that insurance.
Yeah, that's what I did. I got 180 meals.
Yeah,
Charlie,
I got the same.
I couldn't believe how cheap it was. I'm about to order some more, and order it for my kids who are scattered around the place, because 180 meals. Look, I believe that if we're looking at longer than a couple of weeks for this civil unrest or breakdown to occur, it's going to be nearly impossible to put it back together again, and then you're going to have to go look for alternative lifestyles. So yeah. I'm hopeful 2-3 weeks is the max. I mean, that's what
I am too.
Said.
I'm with you. And every time I talk to a hardcore prepper program, though, because I've told these people, look, I didn't know what number to pick. I was in the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, and I remember going into cities that were bombed out. We bombed them for 40 plus days, and we'd go in, and I would just see, civilization was gone. No more infrastructure, no more running water, that kind of thing. And then I saw the carnage and what the people acted like, throwing MREs to kids, only to see old men who were outside the conscription age. Yeah, grab it and punch the kid to take his food. So
I'm getting nauseous listening to this story.
Oh, it was horrible. I mean, you really wanted to light people up for that, but it was a shocker. But so when I started to do some emergency prep for myself and my son, I decided, well, I need to pick a number, so I went for 6 months worth of calories. But I'm exactly like you. I'm hoping 2 to 3 weeks of some kind of severe breakdown. Then we're on the path to perp walking a bunch of these criminals who brought us here, and going back to sound money and a constitutional republic. If it lasts much longer than that, 2, 3, 4, 5 months, then you get into the Mad Max scenario. And I don't want any part of that. I hope it's a natural disaster if it's that case, and it's the Yellowstone caldera, because I'm about 90 miles away from it, and I'd be done. That'd be it. Yeah,
well, there's so many. The one thing you always have to remember is that life is very hazardous to your health, and it's like
that's a good point.
If you remember Catch-22, where basically the guy has to go up on the plane, and the policy of the Army is fly till you die, and he starts to believe that everybody in the universe is out to kill him, whether it's the people sending him up, the people in Italy shooting at him, or everybody becomes the enemy, and that's kind of the scenario. But let's not go there, because I don't believe there is any way to prepare for that. That becomes
no, there isn't. And honestly, Kerry, I don't think that's coming. I don't think Mad Max is coming.
Yeah, now, I seriously doubt it too, because humanity, you can't underplay the ability to adapt and to create new systems when old ones break. I mean, we haven't, this is nothing new here. It's just new to us, right?
That's exactly right.
So anyway, we have expired our allotted time here, Charlie, but to find out more about you, do you take emails from people, by the way?
Yeah, info at wideawakenews.com. And while we were talking, Chris from PrepareWise sent me an offer for you to offer to your customers. It's $500 purchase at preparewise.com. 500 or more, put in the promo code Lutz, Lutz, and you get a free 24 entree pack to go with your $500 order. So preparewise.com, put in the promo code Lutz, and you'll receive 24 free entrees with a $500 purchase.
Oh, man, I love it, because honestly, I don't take sponsors just because they're willing to give me money. I've been doing this now for a year and a half with no sponsors, very few, a gold company. And, Chris contacted me. I checked the stuff out first before I'd agree to it. And I realized this is the best value out there, and there's no chemicals in this stuff, no GMO, and it tastes pretty decent. I mean, let's face it, it's freeze-dried food. It's not going to be like a feast at your local whatever, but it's good for what it is. It doesn't make you wish you were dead when you eat it. Some of this stuff, you really hope that if Armageddon comes, it'll just take you out, because if you have to eat this slop, what is the point of going on? It's good. It's healthy. It's really nutritious. I've tried it just to see, and glad that he put that offer out there. So anyways, Charlie, it's been a total pleasure. I hope I can be on your show shortly. If people want to hear this interview as well as many others that I've done hundreds of interviews now, Charlie, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Get the newsletter, let you know who's on the show, who's going to be on the show, and it's free. Charlie, we will talk to you again soon. You be well.
Thank you, Kerry. It was a pleasure being on.
Likewise.